One footprint, one quiet garden, one deadly secret waiting to sprout. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host Axen. Let me know where are you listening from today. Just drop it in the comments. Hearing from you always brightens my day. Let's begin. If there's one thing I know better than the back of my hand, it's the back of Mr. Nero Wolfe's tomato garden. And by no, I don't mean I wander around out there pruning the brandywines or testing soil acidity, heaven forbid. But I do know it's off limits to anyone but Fritz and Theodore, and even then, only if they've bathed, sworn an oath, and aren't wearing cologne that might offend a sungold. So when I stepped out into the garden to hand Fritz a note from Pearly Stebbins, and saw the footprint, yes, a footprint sunk heel-deep in the raised bed next to a row of yellow pears, I stood there like someone had just called me Mrs. Goodwin. It wasn't Fritz's footprint. His soles are smooth and monkish. And it sure as taxes wasn't Wolfe's. Wolfe doesn't so much walk in the garden as glide in, like a barge in a greenhouse. This footprint was the sharp, clean stamp of a man in a city shoe, and it was I was debating whether to fetch Fritz or alert Homeland Security, when I heard the door creak behind me, and turned to see the source of my daily employment, and semi-nightly ulcers, Wolfe, in person, standing there in his mustard yellow robe, and glaring at the sacrilege before him like it had just insulted Horace. He didn't say a word. Want me to measure it? I offered. Could be a size 10, maybe 11. Not yours. Obvious, unless you're moonlighting in a disguise. I don't know about. Still no answer. Fritz came rushing down the path behind Wolfe, a paring knife in one hand, and a look of terror in the other. Mr. Wolfe, I swear I left the garden locked last night. You did? Wolfe said, his voice dry enough to flake. That was when the doorbell rang. I turned toward the house. Wolfe didn't move. Archie. Yes. Sir, deal with that. And don't step near the footprint. I shall remain here and contemplate desecration. Back in the front room, I found our visitor looking like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to ring again, or just stand there and wait for divine judgment. She was in her 40s, tastefully dressed in linen, with one of those faces that would rather frown than smile. But what got me wasn't her purse or her perfume, it was the little plastic gardening trowel sticking out of her bag, just visible enough to catch a trained eye. Mine. Yes, I said smoothly, stepping in to block the sightline from the garden to the door. She adjusted her grip on the bag. Is this the residence of Mr. Nero Wolfe? It is. I'm Archie Goodwin, his eyes, ears, legs and poor overworked secretary. And you are? Judith Fryer, she said. I'm poor overworked secretary. And you are? Judith Fryer, she said. And I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe. It's about something I saw this morning. In your garden. Well, that hit with the subtlety of a punch from a ballet dancer. I arched an eyebrow. Funny. You don't look like a regular visitor. And our garden isn't exactly open to the public. What were you doing in it? Her mouth twisted into something between embarrassment and resolve. I didn't mean to trespass. I live next door. The rear fences were being repaired. And when I walked out to speak to the contractors, I noticed something odd. I may have stepped in briefly. You don't say. Please. I'm not here to cause trouble. But I saw something that didn't belong. And now I don't know if it was a threat or a warning. She was good. Not polished enough to be lying outright, but careful enough to be hiding something. I nodded once. Wait here. Back in the garden, Wolfe was crouched. Yes, crouched. Next to the footprint like a bear investigating a stolen picnic. I didn't interrupt the sacred examination. I waited until he straightened, wincing, and let out a sigh of disgust. There is a small trace of resin, he muttered. Possibly pine. Idiotic. She's at the front door. Judith Fryer. Lives next door. Says she stepped into the garden this morning. Claims she saw something she didn't understand and wanted to warn you. Also, brace yourself. She's carrying a gardening trowel. He grunted. Horticultural hypocrisy. Shall I show her in? No. He turned and walked back toward the house, with the slow weight of a man carrying 20 years of contempt on his back. Bring her to the office, and tell Fritz to discard the tomatoes. All of them. I will not eat from a soil polluted by pedestrian footwear. 5 minutes later, Judith Fryer sat in the red chair in Wolfe's office, fiddling with the strap of her bag and pretending not to be intimidated. Wolfe regarded her with the bland disinterest of a king being told there's a rat in the pantry. Mrs. Fryer, he began. You have intruded, first physically, now verbally. State your purpose. Succinctly. I'm sorry, Mr. Wolfe. I would never have entered your garden if I'd known it was private. But I saw something this morning. A man. He was standing at the edge of the tomato bed. He looked, well, out of place. He had a hat pulled low and gloves. Even though it was when he saw me, he turned and left through the back gate. But he dropped something. Wolfe didn't twitch. Dropped what? This. She pulled from her bag a small velvet pouch. Inside was a lapel pin, gold-shaped like a tomato vine, with a red enamel fruit. I'll give her this. The woman knew how to build suspense. Wolfe didn't touch the pouch. And why, madam, did you not give that to the police? She hesitated. Because last night someone broke into my shed. They didn't take anything, but they left the exact same pin on the workbench. I think it's some kind of warning. And I think the man I saw today was the same one. Wolfe leaned back, his fingertips meeting just below his chin. And you imagine this concerns me? I think, she said, voice suddenly steady. Someone is using your garden as a message board. And I think you're next. Wolfe didn't reply, but I caught the subtle widening of his nostrils, the shift of his eyes toward the pin. He was interested, and that, for whoever had left the footprint in the tomato bed, was the worst possible news. I didn't need Wolfe to announce that the case had begun. I've worked for him long enough to recognize the microscopic shift from annoyance to interest. He still looked like a man disgusted by the state of the universe, but now that disgust had a direction. That's when things get interesting. For me anyway. For everyone else, it's usually the beginning of a very bad week. Mrs. Fryer sat upright, her back stiff like she'd just remembered she was inside a room where even the dust motes were expected to behave. Wolfe hadn't spoken since his last question, and she was starting to glance between us the way people do when they realize the stillness isn't casual. It's calculated. You say, Wolfe finally said. This pin was left in your shed last night, and then again dropped this morning by a man you describe as gloved and hatted. Yes. Who else have you told about this? No one, she said firmly. Not even my husband. Why? I wasn't sure what to make of it until I saw him again this morning. Then I remembered hearing your name. My husband mentioned you once. Said you were eccentric but frighteningly effective. Wolfe grunted. Flattery will avail you nothing. I have not accepted your case. I merely abhor intrusions upon my horticultural sanctum. She hesitated. Then are you saying you won't help? Wolfe closed his eyes. I am saying that to help I must be convinced that something has occurred which merits intellectual attention. At the moment we have a footprint, a pin, and a pair of uncorroborated sightings of a man whose existence is otherwise unverified. I cleared my throat. She's got a good pair of eyes though. That pin isn't the kind of thing you pick up at Woolworths. I'll bet you $10 it's custom. Speculation, Wolfe muttered, but not without use. He turned slightly. Archie, fetch Theodore. That raised both my eyebrows. When Wolfe calls down the orchid keeper to weigh in on a mystery, you can bet something's caught in the gears of his mind. A few minutes later, Theodore Horstman entered with his usual air of flustered competence, wiping his hands on a cloth as if a few flecks of orchid moss might insult the carpet. Yes, sir. Wolfe gestured to the velvet pouch. Examine that, Theodore. I wish to know if the pin resembles anything in our collection, particularly among the heirloom labels. Theodore opened it, raised his brows at the contents, and took the pin under a light. Interesting, he murmured. This isn't from our lot, but it's a fair likeness. The fruit shape and stalk are consistent with the Solanum lycopersicum, likely referencing a varietal. A varietal, Wolfe prompted. Possibly Costelluto genovese. See the subtle ridges. Could it be a symbol, say, for a society or club? Theodore nodded slowly. It wouldn't surprise me. Some tomato breeders are obsessive. They trade seeds like coin collectors, and there are a few private associations. Wolfe gave him a single nod, and Theodore vanished like a ghost in corduroy. Mrs. Fryer watched the exchange with growing unease. Does that mean someone from one of these tomato clubs is behind this? Madam, I said no such thing, but it is no longer implausible to consider that this object signifies something to someone, and that someone trespassing here, and at your home, wanted it seen. I said it's either a warning, a signal, or an invite, but none of those are comforting options. She gave a tight nod. Then you'll help, Wolfe sighed. I do not appreciate being drawn into enigmas by the back gate. However, I detest coincidence even more. You will leave the pin with me. You will say nothing to your husband, and you will not mention this visit to anyone else. Not even the police, especially not the police. I do not share my vegetables with the NYPD, nor my evidence. She stood and clasped her bag. Thank you. I'm grateful. You are fortunate, Wolfe replied. I do not offer gratitude or reassurance. After she'd gone, I turned toward him. So what now? You want me to tail her? No. She is not the fulcrum. The message was not meant for her. She was a vector. You think she was used? Yes. Wolfe poured a beer, his third that morning, and the garden disturbance hadn't helped his mood. It is possible she was observed, and the pin was planted with the knowledge that she would take it upon herself to investigate. Well, she was right about one thing, I said. That man in the garden didn't just wander in. Whoever he is, he wanted us to notice. Yes, and I intend to oblige him. I opened my notebook. Where do we start? With the pin. Have Saul investigate its origin. Find out who manufactured it. It is too specific to be mass-produced. Tell him to prioritize custom jewelry dealers, particularly those with botanical clients. Got it. And you, he added, will speak to Mrs. Fryer's husband. Casually. I thought we were keeping her visit quiet. We are. But if her husband knows more than she claims he does, I want to know. Be circumspect. Which is wolf speak for snoop like hell, but don't leave fingerprints. That afternoon, I made a neighborly call. The Fryers lived in a narrow brick townhouse next to ours, with a clipped little backyard and a single wooden bench facing the fence. The man who opened the door was in his 50s, narrow-faced, and wearing gardening gloves, which made for a suspicious motif. Mr. Fryer? I asked. Yes, Archie Goodwin. I'm Mr. Wolfe's assistant. Thought I'd pop over, say hello, since we're practically garden to garden. His expression stayed polite, but something tightened behind his eyes. Ah, of course, Nero Wolfe. I've heard of him. I'd be surprised if you hadn't. Big guy, small circle, very territorial about his tomatoes. He smiled faintly. Yes, we've heard about the garden. I glanced past him. Mind if I take a look at your setup? Always good to see how neighbors cultivate their plots. It wasn't much. 3 beds, 1 trellis and a shed that looked like it had been painted during the Hoover administration. Inside the shed was clean, but too clean, like someone had tidied up after something they didn't want noticed. Nice tools, I said, tapping the rack. Do much work at night? He blinked. Night? No. Why? No reason. Just admiring the setup. I'm a sucker for a good pair of shears. He didn't answer. I gave him my warmest grin, and said my goodbyes. Back in the brownstone, I relayed the highlights to Wolfe, who, as expected, didn't react until I finished. He lied, Wolfe said. Which part? All of it. He knows what the pin need. And he was nervous because he thought we might know too. You think he planted it? No. He's too cautious, but he may know who did. That was when the phone rang. Fritz answered, listened, and brought the receiver to Wolfe. After a moment, Wolfe motioned for me to pick up the extension in the kitchen. It was Saul. I tracked the pin, he said. It's a commission piece, made by a small jeweler on West 45th. Custom order. Client name? Amos Fryer. I didn't say anything. You still there, Archie? Yeah, I said slowly. I'm here, and I think we just found our next footprint. The thing about Nero Wolfe is, when he hears a fact that confirms a suspicion, he doesn't do what most people would, sit back satisfied, or do a little I told you so jig. Instead he gets quiet, like the puzzle just tilted a few degrees, and now he can see new lines forming. That's what he did after Saul's call. He set down the receiver, didn't move, and just gazed at the carpet as if it were hiding blueprints to a bank vault. I've seen that look before. That's the look of a man mentally rearranging pawns before anyone else knows there's a chessboard. I gave him a beat. Fryer's the buyer. That changes her story. It clarifies it. Wolfe corrected, not looking up. Her ignorance was genuine. She did not know the pin's origin, but her husband's hands are no longer clean. I'll say, he had that whole act nailed. Nice guy with dirt under his nails. Shed organized within an inch of its life. He even offered me lemonade. A pathetic attempt, Wolfe muttered. You will now return. I blinked. Yes, but you will not speak with Fryer. You will observe. I wish to know whether he leaves the premises today, and if he meets anyone. You want me to stake out our next-door neighbor? Yes. In the back. From the roof. Sure, I said. Nothing like blending in on a brownstone roof, with binoculars. I'll bring a lawn chair and a sandwich to complete the picture. He didn't respond, which was his way of saying good idea. Don't be late. 10 minutes later, I was up on the rear section of the roof, with a pair of field glasses, a notebook and a thermos of Fritz's iced tea, which is how I know I've truly made it in life. The view gave me a perfect angle on the Fryers' tiny backyard, and their rear alley gate. Not exactly the Riviera, but as far as recon assignments go, it wasn't the worst. At 1:43 p.m., Mr. Amos Fryer stepped outside with a phone in one hand and a nervous tick in his jaw. He wasn't gardening. He was pacing. That's not a good sign in a man who says he didn't see anything unusual and doesn't know about a lapel pin. Pacing men are either guilty, anxious, or waiting for someone, sometimes all three. At 2:11, he disappeared into the shed. At 2:12, he came out again empty-handed. At 2:19, a dark green sedan pulled up behind the alley gate. Fryer opened it and exchanged a few words with the driver, a man I couldn't make out clearly, but I caught enough. Grey suit, narrow build, too polished for a casual chat over compost. The driver didn't get out. Instead, he handed Fryer something in a slim envelope. Fryer tucked it into his inside pocket like it was radioactive, and vanished back indoors. I gave it a minute, then I got down from the roof and reported in. Wolfe listened as I ran it down, then closed his eyes. A delivery. The man in the car was expected, and the envelope, unknown. A message, likely, not money too thin. It is possible he is being coerced, or recruited. For what? Tomato-based espionage? Pfui. You saw the pin. That was not a novelty trinket. It was symbolic. Of what? That, he said, is what you will now discover. He sent me uptown to the jeweler Saul had identified. Castell and Doant, a shop so small you'd miss it, unless you needed a diamond engraved with the 10 Commandments. The bet on the door was older than me, and the clerk, who greeted me, looked like he'd been polishing brooches since Hoover was in short pants. Can I help you, sir? I showed him a photo. Saul had texted me of the pin. I'm tracing the source of this design. Custom. My client would like to commission another. He adjusted his glasses. Yes. I remember that piece. It was ordered 3 weeks ago. Mr. Fryer, very particular about the enamel shading. Did he say what it was for? The old man gave a slight frown. No, but he brought a drawing, very exact. Seemed to know the plant anatomy. Said it was important the stem curve match the original. The original? Yes. I assumed it was a replica. That was new. And he wanted more than one? He ordered 4. I let that settle. Only 4? Yes. And he was specific about the pouch as well. He brought it himself. Did he pay with cash? Cash. Yes. But the drawing, he asked us to return it after the job. Said it was sensitive. That wasn't suspicious at all. I left the shop with a mental note that Fryer wasn't just tied to this tomato pin club. He was manufacturing the medals. That made him more than a participant. He was a facilitator. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took this news with a grim silence. 4 pins, 1 left in their shed, 1 dropped in our garden, 2 unaccounted for. Want to guess where they're headed next? No, I want to know who they were intended for, and why. You will now visit the community garden on 89th Street. Mrs. Fryer mentioned contractors and a rear fence. I want to know who had access to both yards this week. I was starting to feel like a delivery boy for an invisible war, but I went. The garden was a modest affair. All neat rows and compost bins, and neighborhood volunteers, who took their radishes way too serious. I found the foreman of the repair crew sitting on a folding stool eating something fried out of a paper bag. His name was Mitch. And he wasn't subtle. Yeah, we did the fence for the Fryers. What about it? Did you notice anyone come through from the other side? Sure, people always wander through when we're working. Most just curious. Any of them wear gloves, and a hat, and look like they didn't want to be seen. He squinted. Come to think of it, yeah. Tuesday morning, guy had a funny walk. Real stiff. Asked if we had seen a bird feeder. Didn't make sense. Did he touch anything? He leaned against the gate. Why? No reason. I thanked him, tipped him $10 for no real help, and headed home. By the time I got back, Wolfe had called Saul again. He turned to me as I entered the office. Miss Panzer has identified a name that connects to Fryer. One Edmund Blas, a horticulturalist, formerly head of a seed preservation group that dissolved under questionable circumstances. Blas now resides in Astoria. What's the link? Fryer invested in one of Blas's projects, a private varietal bank, a tomato vault. Essentially, though I suspect the true contents were not tomatoes, he reached for his beer. You will call Blas tomorrow, request a meeting, use the pin as bait. Tell him we have one, that it was left in our garden, and that we wish to know what it means. Got it. And Archie, take care. This is no longer about fruit. I nodded, but I was already wondering, if the pins weren't just symbols of club membership, what were they? Keys? Warning? Or the kind of markers people used when things were about to get ugly? I didn't know yet, but I had a feeling we'd find the answer before the tomatoes ripened. When I rang Edmund Blas the next morning, he answered like a man who didn't get a lot of calls, or maybe one who got too many and didn't trust any of them. His voice was rough, low, and shaped like it had spent the night arguing with whiskey. This is Blas. Miss Blas. Good morning, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. A long silence. Then, the detective? That's the one. We're calling regarding an item that may belong to you. A pin, gold with a red tomato vine. Nothing. For a second I thought he'd hung up. Then, where did you get that? It was left in Mr. Wolfe's garden. We thought you might want to explain how it got there, preferably in person. Who are you again? Goodwin, Wolfe's assistant. Another pause, shorter this time. I don't talk on the phone. I don't blame you, I said. Phones are slippery things. So how about a meeting? I'm free this afternoon. He gave an address in Astoria, an old brick walk-up near the river. I took that as a yes. I let Wolfe know, and he didn't even grunt, which meant the mental machinery had already moved ahead of me. I headed out around 1 o'clock, and took the long way, in case anyone had eyes on our door. You learn tricks when you work for Wolfe, and the first is don't let anyone know who you're talking to until you know why you're talking. The building was tired looking, with the kind of rust around the buzzer that suggested either long-term disuse or chronic disrepair. I rang anyway. Blas buzzed me in. He lived on the second floor, and the first thing I noticed when he opened the door was the smell. Not foul, just dense. Soil, old books, citrus cleaner. The man himself was in his 60s, grey hair combed straight back, skin like driftwood. He had a gardener's tan and an ex-con's posture. Not that he was a criminal, he just moved like someone who knew how to stay out of reach. You brought it? He asked. I held up the pouch and opened it just enough to show the pin. He reached out. I closed it again. Talk first. He gestured to a worn armchair. Fine. Sit. Don't touch the shelf behind you. It's booby-trapped. I didn't ask if he was joking. I just stayed upright. Mr. Blas, I said, this pin was dropped by someone trespassing in our garden. The same kind of pin was also found in a neighbor's shed. The common link is Amos Fryer. He leaned back and exhaled hard through his nose. Fryer, that idiot. I'm listening. Blas shook his head. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The group was meant to be private, confidential, a preservation effort. We had a charter, codes, signatures, but he started treating it like a game, making symbols, badges, turning a cause into a club. Let's slow down. What was this group about? He narrowed his eyes. We called it the Red Cellar. Small circle, 6 of us, all tomato cultivators. Yes, but that was the face. What we really did was trade seeds. Old seeds, uncatalogued, rare, some illegal to own in quantity thanks to bio patents. Let me guess, not exactly FDA approved. We weren't doing anything harmful, just preserving lineages, before the corporations could sterilize the market. And Fryer, he came in as a sponsor, said he wanted to protect the heirlooms. He helped fund a vault, a literal cellar, in upstate New York. But then he started pushing for branding, symbols, rituals, and the pin. His idea. It refused. So did another member, Lena Vespert. She resigned. The others, I'm not sure. We stopped meeting 6 months ago. Why? Someone tried to break into the vault, cut the locks, but couldn't get past the second layer. We took it as a warning, and we scattered. Was Fryer behind it? I don't know, but he got scared. Started acting jumpy. After that, I went dark, shut off the phone, closed the books. Until now, he gave a weary nod. When you said Wolfe's Garden, I thought someone was using it as a message board. Message for who? For anyone watching. A pin in a shed means infiltration. A pin in your garden, that's escalation. I sat back. You think this is some kind of coded system? I know it is. 4 pins, 4 members. Each pin is a signal. One shows exposure, another means surveillance. I don't know what the 3rd and 4th are. That was Fryer's part. I let that hang a moment. You're telling me some tomato collectors set up a symbolic warning system like Cold War spies? Blas didn't blink. You laugh, Goodwin, but you've never had Monsanto legal slap you with a subpoena for storing seeds they claim to own. You've never watched 3 generations of breeding vanish in one night because someone poured bleach on your seedlings. Fair. I gave him my card. If you think of anything else, especially where the last 2 pins might be, you call me. Wolfe doesn't like being used as a chess piece. I don't either, Blas said. But I think we both already are. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened with the kind of deep, indrawn silence that would give an opera singer anxiety. Then he spoke. This vault, we must find it. Blas didn't give a location. Said it was in the Catskills, but nothing more specific. We must compel Miss Fryer to confess. Or panic. I smiled. You've got a plan. Of course. Arrange for Mr. Fryer to receive an anonymous photograph of the pin in your hand, taken in our garden. Caption it, he sees all footprints. No return address. Lovely, I said. Cryptic and creepy, he nodded. Then we shall wait. We didn't wait long. At 9:17 p.m., the phone rang. Fritz answered. It's Mr. Fryer, he whispered. He sounds distraught. I took the call. Fryer's voice was tight with panic. Mr. Goodwin, I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe. It's urgent. Please. He's indisposed. Then you please. I think I've made a mistake. I need help. I think someone's watching me. I didn't know. Slow down. No time. Can I come over, please? I looked at Wolfe. He nodded. Once. Come to the front door. Now. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. 20 minutes later, Amos Fryer stood in Wolfe's office, pale, sweating, and visibly trembling. He was no longer the tidy neighbor with clipped hedges and a clean shed. He looked like a man who'd just realized the fire he helped build was now circling back to burn him. I didn't know they'd go that far, he said, eyes darting around. It was supposed to be a mark of membership. That's all. I thought the pins were a gesture. Wolfe didn't move. What did you tell Blas? Nothing. I didn't know he'd vanish. Or Lena. She left. But I thought. Mr. Fryer, Wolfe said with glacial precision. You funded an underground vault. You designed a symbolic code. You distributed emblems, and now they are being used for intimidation. I want to know who has the other 2 pins, and where they are. Fryer broke. One went to Devlin Ames. He's a collector in Jersey. He wanted to take the vault public, commercialize it. He said it would shake the industry. He's a lunatic. The 4th. He hesitated. I don't know. Lena took it when she resigned. She said she'd destroy it. Maybe she didn't. Where is she now? I haven't heard from her in months. Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, we will now locate Miss Vespert. She is either in hiding or dead. That was Wolfe's version of a weather alert. And for the first time in this case, I felt something I hadn't felt yet. Actual dread. I've seen fear wear a lot of faces. But the one Fryer wore that night was the kind that sticks cold sweat, rambling mouth, darting eye. The man was unraveling, and I couldn't tell yet whether it was because he'd finally realized the consequences of his hobby-turned-covert operation, or because someone out there was pulling strings he never saw. Wolfe didn't indulge the panic. He let Fryer spiral just long enough to extract the useful bits. Devlin Ames in Jersey, Lena Vespert unaccounted for, and then dismissed him like a bad plate of eggs. Archie, he said as the door shut behind Fryer, locate Miss Vespert. Begin with public database, cross-reference with horticultural registries. If she has disappeared, someone will have noticed. And if she hasn't, then we invite her to dinner. I got to work. Lena Vespert wasn't a common name. A few city records placed her in Brooklyn Park Slope, a quiet brownstone street, not unlike our own, just with more baby strollers and fewer orchid rooms. She had once managed a community garden grant program. One article quoted her on the importance of biointegrity and seed sovereignty, which sounded like things Blas would nod solemnly about over compost. But the trail thinned out about 5 months ago. No new mentions. No updated addressing. Not even a social media account for the usual digital breadcrumbs. Just a blank space where a person had been. I checked hospital admissions, professional associations, even arrest records. Nothing. It was past midnight when I struck gold. An expired lease application for an upstate cabin rental, signed L. Vespert, dated just a week after the red seller had supposedly disbanded. It had been declined due to incomplete payment, but it listed a contact number. The number was dead, but the address on the form wasn't. I showed Wolfe the next morning. He studied the printout without comment. Then he nodded once. Take Saul. That was it. No lecture, no preamble, just a name and an instruction. By early afternoon, Saul and I were rolling north in a rental. The cabin sat outside a town that didn't make it onto most maps. About 2 hours from the city, wedged between a pine grove and a forgotten stretch of county road. It was the kind of place you went if you wanted to stay found only by squirrel. We parked at the edge of the drive, killed the engine, and listened. No car, no sound, no smoke. Quiet, Saul muttered. We stepped carefully to the porch and I knocked. No answer. I tried again, louder, still nothing. You think she bolted? I asked. Saul shrugged. Let's check around back. We circled the cabin. The backyard was a scrubby lot with a rusted fire pit and a lopsided shed, and on the side of the cabin wall below a single grimy window we found it. A footprint. Not just any footprint. A clean, sharp, fresh and too deep for someone casually walking. Someone had stood here, long enough to press into the softened ground, and the shoe print was familiar. It matched the one in Wolfe's tomato bed. We froze, then exchanged a glance. If she's still here, I said. We're not alone. We circled back to the front and knocked again. This time the door creaked open half an inch. Door creaked open. Then a voice from behind it. Who are you? Lena Vespert, I asked. Depends. I held out my ID and Wolfe's card. We're not cops. We're here on behalf of Nero Wolfe. You may have heard of him. Silence. Then slowly the door opened. Lena Vespert looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was tied back in a rough knot, and she wore an oversized sweater that hung off her like a flag of surrender. Her eyes, though, those were sharp. She wasn't broken, just braced for something worse. You came from the city, she asked. We did, I said, because people are leaving pins in places they shouldn't. Her face twitched. They started using the symbols. They did. She let us in. The inside of the cabin was clean but sparse. No photos, no personal clutter. A pile of old gardening journals sat on the table, along with a field radio and a pair of binoculars. You expecting someone? I asked, nodding at the surveillance gear. I saw someone watching the cabin last night, she said. Didn't know if it was one of the others. Or were Blas? No, he wouldn't. Not after what happened to the vault. What did happen? She hesitated. Then, Fryer tried to sell it. We both blinked. Sell what? The vault. The fault. The seeds. There are heirloom strains in that collection worth hundreds of thousands. Some are extinct in the wild. Corporations would pay for exclusivity. Fryer got an offer. I found out. I left. And the others? They didn't believe me. Or didn't care. What about the pins? I burned mine. Saul stepped forward. Then someone replicated it. Because one's been left at your old house. One in Wolfe's garden. And one was handed off in an alley. We think the fourth is in Jersey. She looked pained. That's Devlin. We know. She sat down. If Devlin. We know. She sat down. If Devlin has one, then it's not a warning system anymore. It's a hit list. I frowned. Meaning the pins mark the next target. Fryer made the system, but Devlin's the one using it now. For what? To clean house. Saul said nothing, but I could tell he didn't like the sound of that any more than I did. Devlin wants sole control, Lena continued. Blas won't join him. I wouldn't either. And Fryer's unstable. Devlin's trying to erase the rest of us. How does Wolfe fit into that? I asked. She looked at me steadily. He doesn't. He's just where Fryer panicked. And when Devlin realized that, he probably decided to make him part of the board. I stood. That's not going to sit well with Wolfe. No, she agreed. It shouldn't. We got her to agree to come back to the city, under protection, at least for the night. Saul called Ori on the way and had him secure a safe place. Lena didn't argue. She just seemed tired. When we got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting in the office with his arms folded over his belly, like a judge about to hand down a sentence. Miss Vespert, he said with a nod. She nodded back. Mr. Wolfe, you are in danger. I know. He studied her. You will remain under watch. You are not to return to the cabin. I won't. Wolfe turned to me. And now, Archie, we prepare. Devlin Ames must be invited. I wish to look into his eyes when he realizes the board has been tilted. I said, that's going to take bait. Wolfe smiled faintly. We have Lena. And just like that, the game changed again. Wolfe doesn't waste stationery on men like that. Instead, he had me make the kind of call that lights fuses, short, deliberate, and sure to detonate. I got his number from Lena, who warned me, he'll never admit anything. But if you say the right words, he won't resist. So I called Devlin at his antiques business in Jersey, Ames and Cask, where he sold weathered trunks and walnut writing desks to Manhattanites who liked their furniture distressed and overpriced. When he answered, his voice was slick and amused. Ames, Miss Ames, this is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. A pause. Then I didn't realize Wolfe was interested in antiques. He's not. He's interested in footprints, especially the ones that don't belong in his tomato beds. A longer pause. I'm listening. We have one of your pins. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, and so does Lena Vespert. That did it. He didn't ask how we found her. He didn't ask what she'd told us. He simply said, where and when. Today, 5 o'clock. Mr. Wolfe's office. He hesitated a moment longer. Then fine. He hung up without another word. I turned to Wolfe, who'd been sitting in his chair with his hands tented under his chin. He's come. Of course he is, Wolfe said, with the satisfaction of a fisherman who's just watched the line go taut. The rest of the day moved like something preparing for impact. Fritz was instructed to make no dinner plans. Saul and Ori were stationed discreetly nearby, one inside, one out. Lena was settled in the front room, out of sight but within earshot. Wolfe had her coached. No outbursts, no interruptions. She agreed, her voice steady, though I could see the storm she was holding back. At 5 sharp the bell rang. I opened the door and found Devlin Ames, exactly as Lena had described him, lean, tanned, prematurely grey, with a fashion sense that screamed effortless money, and a face that didn't. He wore a pale blue jacket, tan slacks, and a gold pin on his lapel, not a tomato though, just a tasteful bit of enamel meant to say I know things you don't. He didn't offer a hand, just looked at me with mild interest. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Ames, right this way. I led him to the office, where Wolfe waited, massive and motionless behind his desk. Mr. Ames, Wolfe said without rising, you are here because I do not appreciate anonymous gardeners treating my property as a message board. Ames smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. You placed or had placed a token in my garden, a symbol from a now defunct group, one that has since become less a preservation society than a battlefield. I have no idea what you're talking about. You distributed the pins. You marked Fryer. You visited Miss Vespert's cabin. And now you are here, because your plan has failed. Ames didn't blink. You think there was a plan? I know there was. Fryer confessed. Blas provided context. And Miss Vespert is alive. That got him. The mask cracked, just for a second. A flicker in the eyes. She's here? He asked, voice suddenly low. No, Wolfe lied smoothly. But she has spoken to me. You left a footprint outside her window. I doubt that. You shouldn't, I cut in. Same tread that showed up in our garden. Real tidy. Real distinctive. Leather-soled size 11 heel scuffed on the left side. I've got photos. Ames crossed his legs. And what do you think this proves? That you've been trying to eliminate your former partners under the guise of symbols. You turned Fryer's codes into a threat system. You made the pins into marks. Fryer got scared. Lena ran. Vas hid. You remained calculating. Waiting. He chuckled softly. That's an elegant theory. But you're forgetting something. I never forced anyone. I didn't even create the system. Fryer did. You weaponized it. Wolfe said. Fryer built the frame. You filled the bullets. Still not a crime. Not yet, Wolfe said. But trespass, intimidation and attempted coercion carry weight, particularly when attached to a pattern, and when backed by witnesses. I suppose you'd need evidence for that. Wolfe gestured subtly toward me. I stepped to the side door and opened it. Lena walked in. She didn't look fragile anymore. She looked angry. Ames stood. You shouldn't be here. I'm not the one who left pins in people's homes, she said. You ran. You sold us out. He turned back to Wolfe. This is a setup. Indeed, Wolfe said. You were invited here to be confronted. Not physically. Intellectually. Lena moved closer. You tried to erase everyone who wouldn't follow you. You used the vault as bait and the pins as threats. You scared Fryer so badly. He walked into Wolfe's office babbling like a broken faucet. You have no proof. I do, I said. Vas confirmed your plan. Fryer cracked. And Lena's willing to testify. You trespassed on private property twice. Once to leave a warning, and once to intimidate. Still not illegal. It is, Wolfe said. If the vault's contents were under shared ownership, Fire's financial stake does not confer absolute authority, and if you attempted to sell proprietary biological material without consent. Ames's mouth twisted. You can't possibly, then you will be facing not only civil litigation, Wolfe continued calmly, but a federal investigation. The Agricultural Biosecurity Division takes theft of registered seed lines quite seriously. Ames paled. For the first time, he looked ratty. You wouldn't. I won't, Wolfe said. Provided you return the pins, withdraw any offer made regarding the vault, and leave the others alone. That's it? No, Wolfe said. Eyes narrowed. You will also deliver the ledger you took from the vault, complete with inventory and transaction history. I want to know what you offered, and to whom. You have no right to. I have no right, Wolfe agreed. But you have no leverage, and the police, I assure you, will be far less forgiving. Ames sat down slowly. His hands trembled once, then stopped. I'll get the ledger, he said quietly. I'll deliver it tomorrow. You'll deliver it now, Wolfe replied. Saul Panzer will accompany you. I buzzed Saul. He entered silently. Ames stared at him for a long moment, then stood. Fine. As they left, Lena exhaled deep, shaky but clear. Wolfe leaned back. The game is concluded, he said, and the garden is once again clean. Just one question, I said. Yeah, do I get to eat the tomatoes now? Wolfe gave me a rare smirk. If Fritz hasn't burned them out of spite. Lena laughed quietly. Then she said, Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. I did nothing, Wolfe replied. It was the footprints that spoke. I merely listened, which was his way of saying, I won. And now I will be unreachable until further notice. As Lena left, Wolfe reached for his beer, and the world of heirlooms, vaults, and symbolic threats faded behind the sanctum of the brownstone's walls. Another game finished, another garden preserved, and just in time for dinner. By the time Saul returned with the ledger, Devlin Ames was looking like a man who'd bitten into a lemon and couldn't spit it out. He handed it over without ceremony, muttered something about legal overreach, and stalked off with the kind of indignation that usually needs a drink and a lawyer to soothe. I took the leather-bound book from Saul and flipped it open. Inside was a handwritten inventory of the red cellar's contents, hundreds of seed varietals, organized by species, rarity, genetic origin, and estimated market value. It was meticulous and damning. Look at this, I said, turning the book toward Wolfe. Devlin wasn't just collecting, he was cataloging assets. He planned to sell this like a venture portfolio. Wolfe scanned a few lines. Of course, to those who manufacture scarcity, rarity is currency. A seed preserved is a potential monopoly. Devlin intended to corner a future market by owning a genetic past. I flipped toward the back. Here, projected commercial contacts. He listed companies, hedge funds, even a Swiss consortium. Wolfe grunted. Which means the danger has not passed. The buyers will ask questions when their offer vanishes. Someone will want to know who interfered. Yes, yes. He leaned back, eyes narrowing, which is why we must ensure the vault's security, and end this affair with precision. Lena, seated quietly on the red chair, straightened. What do you need? Coordinates, Wolfe said simply. The vault's exact location. Blas claimed it was hidden. You left before it was compromised. I require confirmation that it has not been accessed since. She nodded. I can give you that. I buried a second lockbox on site before I left. A contingency plan. It has a moisture sensor and a manual GPS. If the vault has been opened, it will tell us. Good. You will accompany Mr. Goodwin tomorrow to retrieve it. I blinked. You're sending me upstate again? You're familiar with the terrain, and Miss Vespert will require escort. I trust Saul and Ori to protect the brownstone. I trust you to walk into a forest and not fall over a mushroom. I'm touched. He waved a hand. Go. Lena and I left early the next morning. I brought gloves, a flashlight, and a thermos of Fritz's coffee, which could have revived a corpse. Lena gave directions in a quiet, methodical voice as we drove. Her tension had returned, less fear this time, more bracing. She was preparing to see a part of her life she'd tried to seal shut. The vault site was near a defunct apple orchard, tucked behind a low ridge on private land that had apparently been unmonitored for years. We parked behind a rotting barn and walked half a mile through underbrush until we reached a clearing. At its center stood a moss-covered trapdoor, half concealed by vines and brambles. Lena knelt, brushed aside the debris, and located the buried lockbox 10 feet to the right beneath a flat rock. She opened it and pulled out a blinking unit the size of a... The display was old-school numbers and dots, but it was working. She punched a few buttons. The screen flashed green. "Vault hasn't been opened," she said. I exhaled. "That's a relief." She gave me a wry smile. "Don't breathe just yet. This confirms no one's accessed it, but it doesn't mean they won't. We're locking it down. We're relocating it." I raised an eyebrow. "To where?" "Somewhere Wolfe will never visit, but where no one will trespass without hearing a shotgun pump without hearing." "Well," I said, "that narrows it down to about 3 counties." She chuckled. "I have a friend." By the time we got back to the car, I'd committed the new coordinates to memory. She made a call. Brief, to the point. Then she turned to me and said, "It's done." We returned to the brownstone late that afternoon. Wolfe listened to our report with only 2 interruptions. One to demand proof of the moisture sensor's function, the other to scold Fritz for trying to serve trout out of season. "I'm satisfied," Wolfe finally declared. "The vault is secure. The game is ended." I wasn't so sure. That evening, while Wolfe retreated to the orchids, I sat in the office flipping through the ledger again. Something about it nagged at me, a detail buried in the meticulous script. Then I saw it, a second set of initials beside some entries. Not Devlin's, not Fryer's. AV. I frowned. "Lena," I called. She stepped into the room. "Yes? Who's AV?" Her face changed. "Oh no," she whispered. "Anton Velen." "Who?" "He was one of the original 6. He left early, disagreed with the secrecy, said we should be publishing, not hiding. We thought he'd gone quiet, but if his name is in that book, it means he's still in the game, and Devlin may not have been acting alone." I picked up the phone. Wolfe answered. "Yes? We've got another player." A pause. "Come upstairs," he said. "Bring Miss Vespert." When we joined him in the plant rooms, Wolfe was inspecting a rare cymbidium orchid. He didn't look up as he said, "Tell me." I explained the initials. Lena filled in the backstory. Wolfe listened in silence. Then he set the orchid down and turned. "Anton Velen," he repeated. "Do you know where he is?" "No," Lena said. "Last I heard, he moved to Canada. But that was 2 years ago. Then he is either still abroad or returned under the radar." I nodded. "You think he's the money behind Devlin? Perhaps. Or the motivator? You want me to find him?" Wolfe's eyes glinted. "No, I want him to find us." He left it at that, which meant the plan was forming. And sure enough, the next morning Wolfe had one of his signature maneuvers ready. Theatrical subtlety. He instructed me to leak a snippet from the ledger, just enough to suggest that certain transactions were known, and that a former member had come forward. We did it through a gardening newsletter run by one of Saul's contacts, hidden in an article about rare cultivars. 24 hours later, Wolfe received a package. No note, no return address, just a single tomato. Small red, perfectly shaped, nestled in a black box with a card that read, "A seed, returned." "You know too much." I showed it to Wolfe. He didn't even blink. "Now," he said, "we are close." And I could tell by the tone in his voice, we weren't done. Not yet. Not until the last pin dropped. It was the tomato that did it. Not the pin, not the footprints, not even Devlin Ames, muttering like a cornered rat, but the tomato, pristine and glistening in that black velvet box like it was meant to be worn, not eaten. Wolfe held it in the palm of his hand for nearly a minute, examining its color, the depth of its ribbing, and the slightly unnatural sheen on the skin. "This," he finally pronounced, "is no ordinary Solemnica persicum." I watched from my desk. "You mean it's not grocery grown?" "I mean it is not grown. It is made." He set it gently on the blotter. "It was cultivated to be a message. Bit flashy for a threat." "Flashy? Yes," Wolfe murmured, "but precise. It was plucked within 24 hours. The temperature of the box suggests refrigerated transit. The stem was trimmed with a sterilized blade. Too clean for a hobbyist. You think it's Velen? I know it is. Still no return address. He would never be so sloppy. He wants us to see his style. not his fingerprints. He closed his eyes, and I could see the map forming behind his eyelids. Connections, implications, contradictions. When Wolfe goes silent like that, the only question is how long it'll take before he speaks, and ends the game with a few neatly constructed sentences. But not this time, not yet. Instead he opened his eyes, and said, "Call." By the time Saul arrived, Lena was back in the office, arms folded, watching the tomato like it might start reciting names. Wolfe motioned for us all to sit. Mr. Velen, he said, was not merely a dissenter, he was an ideologue. He believed in revelation, not secrecy. When Fryer's plan to sell the vault was exposed, Devlin sought control through coercion, but Velen, he sees the preservation of seeds as a sacred duty. The ledger, in his view, is blasphemy, a price tag on purity. Saul nodded. Then the tomato's a symbol, not a threat. It is both. He returned a seed because he believes the vault has been profaned, and he intends to take it back. Lena stiffened. By force? No, Wolfe said. By exposure. I frowned. You think he's going public? Wolfe nodded once. Or worse, he already had. We all sat with that for a second. The idea of a man as principled and obsessed as Velen, airing out the vault's secrets to the world, was unsettling, not because he'd be wrong, but because of the chaos it would bring. Saul, Wolfe said, you will investigate Anton Velen's recent movements. Begin with customs. Look for private flights from Ontario. Trace anything that connects him to botanical shipments or research facilities in the tri-state area. Yes, and Archie, let me guess. I'm going to visit some plant people. Indeed, the tomato in that box is a Velen hybrid. Someone cultivated it. Recently, discreetly. There are only a handful of locations in this region where such work can be done legally. Labs, test plot, university greenhouses. Precisely. Begin with the Botanical Research Center at Hudson View University. Pose as a journalist. Take the tomato. You want me to carry it around like a business card? Wolfe looked at me. If necessary, use it as bait. I wrapped the tomato in cotton and packed it in a small box. By noon I was driving north to Hudson View, a tidy campus with a view of the river and a faculty that took itself more seriously than it should. I flashed a fake press badge and asked to speak with whoever was in charge of agricultural trials. They sent me to Dr. Harriet Quill. Quill was